Welcome to Avenue M. My name is Joey Taylor.
And I'm Haroon Mogul.
We're two men on a journey of faith and meaning. In each episode, we unpack the moments that shape us, the struggles that build us, and the questions that intrigue us. Last week, while watching Morocco's dramatic World Cup victory, I found myself wrestling with an unexpected question. In this episode, Haroon and I explore whether God cares who wins the World Cup, what prayer is actually for, and whether sports have become one of our most powerful forms of religion, capable of shaping our identities, loyalties, and even our understanding of God. Last week I was watching this game, Morocco and the Netherlands, and something happened that kind of struck me. A little context, coming from a Christian background, really loving sports a lot. There's two things that are really, really common that I think everybody who has ever watched a sporting event will be familiar with, which is that after a team wins any type of sporting event, football game, basketball game, you name it, a reporter will come up and put a mic in the star player's face, right? Like right off the bat. And they'll ask some question that's something like, how are you feeling right now? A classic response is, before I say anything else, I just want to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So that's one incredibly common thing I think we've all heard. True? Haroon?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
cool.
I too have heard that watching the sports.
Watching the sports. And then the second thing that's really common is for two teams to congregate at the 50-yard line or the center court or whatever at the end of a game to pray. For me, as a Christian, I often find these actions a little cringy. A little like, ooh, it makes me feel a little uncomfortable. So I was watching this Morocco and Netherlands game. It was all tied up at the end of regulation. And before they went into extra time, the Moroccan team gathered and prayed together. And then they ended up winning this incredible penalty kick kind of back and forth. Really crazy.
Yeah, it was a great game.
Yeah, incredible game. After they won, they all prayed again together.
Yeah, they all dropped to the pitch. They did sajda, prostration.
Exactly. So I couldn't help but draw a parallel between these two things. My response when the Moroccan players did this wasn't, I didn't feel cringy or awkward like I did with Christians, probably because I just see it so often in the U.S. context with Christians that it felt a little bit like, oh, the playing field has been evened a bit. So some of it is that. But I started to think about it. I'm like, should this be something that makes me feel uncomfortable as well in terms of how does God interacting with sporting events? And so the big question for us today is, does God care about who wins the World Cup?
Yes,
and so,
absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. So
was that a yes or no question, or was that, did I just interrupt you?
No, tell me, why do you think God cares?
So wait, I want to rewind. So Morocco, Netherlands goes to penalty kicks for the maybe 50 or 60 people in America who don't know what the World Cup is. It's an elimination match. You said you thought you should feel uncomfortable.
Didn't feel uncomfortable.
You did not.
But I started to think about it, and I drew this parallel to my experience of Christians doing this in a similar context. And I started to wonder, should this evoke some discomfort in me? Is there some tension here with how I think about God and the way that prayer works and the way that God operates with things like sporting events?
Such a good question. And so now I want to tell you how I came at this, because when you dropped the question on me, I had been experiencing the World Cup entirely differently. Rewind 4 years ago, we're coming out of COVID. There's a World Cup in Qatar, and the Morocco team makes its kind of Cinderella run. No one is expecting this, and they make it all the way to the semifinals, and they were booted out, I believe, by Spain. And yeah, all the same, for a lot of people in the world, this was entirely unprecedented. For those who don't know World Cup history, only two continents have produced winners, South America and Europe. If Europe is really a continent, that should be next week's episode. A little bit of post-colonial pet peeving. That's all I'm going to say. As an American and a Muslim, I feel like I can go to Europe from both directions. So for a lot of people like me, when this World Cup rolls around, it's even more exciting. It's in the U.S. and Canada and Mexico. America's got a good team. More on that later. And then Morocco's making a run for it again. And so this is for the first time.
And you could call this run, I don't know, a miracle, maybe?
I don't know if I'd call it a miracle, because a miracle could be condescending and make it seem like they weren't working for it, but it was unprecedented, right? So if Cabo Verde 2030 World Cup makes another deep run, we'd say, oh yeah, we remember this from last time. This team is really good. For us, the question was it a fluke? Is Morocco legit? Are they a real contender? And now it seems like they are. And now they're playing on Thursday. They're playing France, slightly loaded, only slightly loaded. colonizer versus former colony a little intense. And so for me, it actually leveled the playing field. So I came at this from a completely different perspective. You said that it was hitting a nerve with reference to how you were raised in a Christian context. And for me, this is actually striking a chord with some of the conversations I see in Muslim spaces that are still mired in a narrative of we as a community are marginalized, we are victims, we are constantly pressed upon, spat upon, put down, and excluded. And I would just point to the World Cup and say that is manifestly false. Because hundreds of millions, billions of people, including unprecedented numbers here in the United States, are seeing Muslim players and all kinds of teams openly embracing Muslim religion and practice as part of a global conversation, and they're competing at elite levels, and it's a positive story. So for me, seeing Muslim prayer alongside Catholic invocations, other Christian invocations on a global stage is a way of saying we are actually part of many more spaces and conversations than we might think, or some of us might want us to believe. And so I was looking at it, until you posed it that way, as nothing but positive.
Interesting. And when you saw the Moroccan team do this, did you find it beautiful, inspiring? How did you experience it emotionally?
My initial reaction was I was nonplussed. It didn't even register to me as a remarkable thing. What was more remarkable to me was the fact that the rest of the world got to see it. For me, raised in a very religious and Muslim context, we invoke God so often that it's not necessarily a transactional act. It's not necessarily a kind of quid pro quo type thing. It's just something you do. It rolls off your tongue.
Yeah.
Whatever the situation, and you start eating, you take a penalty kick, you win a World Cup match, you make it home safe after bad weather, you just say, alhamdulillah, thank God. It's sometimes in a bad way, it can be unthinking, it can be reflexive, but in many ways, it's just beautiful. At the very least, it's part of the rhythm of your life.
Yeah, I hear you. I think one of the things that you just said at the beginning of your answer, though, is what gives me pause. Because a lot of what's happening, I think, for me, in terms of the cringiness of Christians doing this in a post-athletic event kind of context, is that it feels like the audience is very clearly not God. It's the general public, right? And so it feels like a tool of evangelism or some like kind of public platform kind of thing. And there's a famous gospel passage that says, when you pray, go and shut the door and do it in privacy. And so there is this like real humility to the action of prayer that's often emphasized within traditional Christian context. But when you experienced that, the Moroccan players, you're saying the primary audience that you felt there was an impact upon was the general population. And I understand that, but unpack who should have been the audience for this prayer.
First, you're making me think about this in many different ways in multiple registers. It's such a rich conversation. And I do think that the answer to, does God care who wins the World Cup, is a yes, but maybe not in the way that people might initially hear it. So I'll come back to that. For me as a parent, there were different audiences. One was our kids. They have been in an environment where they've seen a lot of injustice and ugliness in the world. They've seen a lot of negativity and hostility towards their religious identity, towards religion more broadly, and to all kinds of communities. So to see someone who prays like them, who competes like them in sports, but obviously on a completely different playing field and register, then embrace that religious identity is, to me, deeply meaningful. Is to say, you can be your full self. You don't have to check any part of yourself and enter through any door, so long as it's a good door, it's a moral door, it's a virtuous door. That's important. But I also think it's important as an instructive lesson. And I actually, to me, this came back to me and pointed out my own flaws and failures. That I thought about how many times, just in the past week, I've been impatient, I've been negative, I've been condescending, I've been maybe not the best version of myself. And now imagine I'm a world-class athlete. I'm not. I'm playing on probably the biggest stage in the world. And right before something that would wreck 99.9% of people, penalty kicks, elimination match, you've worked 4 years for this, you may never be back again, you think of God. And then when you win, you praise God, which means that at the pinnacle of your career, at the peak of your performance, you're on the pitch, when your ego could rise really high, you make it a point to humble yourself. Now, you do raise a good question. Is that sincere or not? And for Muslims, this is an added challenge because our prayer is embodied. And it is, maybe I wouldn't say the word public, but it is public, right? We are supposed to pray congregationally. We're supposed to pray together. It's supposed to encourage you, but there is a danger to that, because how do I know that I'm not praying so that people see me pray?
Yeah.
How do I know that I'm not invoking God because that's just what people expect me to do? And if I don't do that, I will be penalized or ostracized or somehow marginalized?
Right.
And that's a really important question. And for me, that I think it pulled in both directions. One is, am I in a moment of stress or pressure or crisis capable of checking myself and my ego enough to bring God into the conversation? But also, if I'm doing that, is that me being sincere or me being transactional? Is it me being performative? And how do I even know?
I think that the representation piece really resonates with me. That makes a ton of sense. I also think that it's totally fair for people of faith to talk to God, to pray to God about the things that they're experiencing, the things they care about. All of that, I don't feel there's no level of cringiness for me at all in terms of those things. It's also important to say that Christians do, in fact, pray congregationally as well. They do, but it does have a different valence than Islamic prayers. One of the things that seems to give me some tension is that I'm imagining what the prayer is in these different contexts, right? What is the actual content of the prayer? And that seems to be, for me, where the rubber hits the road. Because if these Moroccan players were praying to win, on one level, that's what I would want if I were in their shoes. That's a totally fair prayer. But like, what if players from the Netherlands were praying for something similar? How does that work?
Well, clearly God decided the outcome of that one.
Okay,
so we know whose prayers won.
Well, also, but I think you're joking, but I also think there is a really...
Am I joking?
There's a temptation for us to validate our wins, our successes, by looking back and say, well, God, this was God's plan all along. And obviously, the other people didn't pray enough, weren't faithful enough, whatever it was. That didn't allow them to receive a positive outcome. I don't think that's how God works. I don't think that God is working for our conception of the good. I think there's a larger kind of like sense of the good at play here. So if you were in that huddle praying for the extra time, how would you think about what to pray for in that moment? What would be a good prayer to pray in that moment?
When I was watching the game, obviously not playing in the game, when I was watching the game, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. So I don't even know what I would have prayed for medical transportation nearby, possibly an Imodium. It was really stressful. That's a lot to put. It's a lot to put on your shoulders. Yeah, I mean, in theory, they've all played, or many of them have played at an elite level. I think I'm really glad you brought up Donald Trump in your question, because president who can't fix reflecting pool tries to fix match and has equal amounts of success. Like within 3 days, he tanked the American team. But I think your point is valid, because look at what happened to us as a country. We confuse success on so many registers, not as a gift, but as a confirmation of some kind of status that absolved us of certain moral commitments.
Yes.
That we don't have to play by the rules. The irony of Marco Rubio telling the Iranians, for example, Strait of Hormuz is an international waterway and you can't just toll, there's international law. And it's like, really, you're the administration that wants to tell people about international law? And then a week later, President Trump is intervening with FIFA to get a red card overturned. Like, it's a bad look, whatever was happening. But I think that your point is valid. And I think the question to me, when I reflect on what you're saying, is how do I act in victory and how do I act in defeat? And I think that actually religiously, that is more of an indicator of your status with God than whether or not you won or lost. Because the Morocco team may be eliminated on Thursday after playing with France. And one could ask, are they going to fall to the pitch and prostrate in gratitude that they made it that far? I don't know. But one might also ask that if they win, do they think they win because they're better people? Or because they competed better? And soccer is obviously not the right frame. I don't know that someone says, oh, because I'm really good at basketball, I'm a superior human being. But maybe we do. Maybe we look at our gifts and we say, this is because God loves me, that God loves me, and therefore I'm rich, or I'm famous, or I'm successful, or at least I'm not that person, or this is my skin color, this is my ethnicity, ancestry. I'm sure people do that. So my question then for you is that from a Christian tradition, how do you check yourself? Like, how do you stop and say, because to your point, you're entirely valid. Who among us does not pray for, hey, I hope I ace that job interview. Dear God, give me, enough money to cover our expenses, help me pay off these debts. I want my family to be successful, my kids to be healthy. Where's the line between that and the transactional, the self-aggrandizing?
The genie in a bottle God. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our sponsor is the Brueggemann Center for Dialogue at Xavier University here in Cincinnati, which is dedicated to deepening understanding across faiths and promoting systemic change. You can learn more about the Brueggemann Center and Xavier University in the show notes. Now, back to the conversation.
We talked a little bit to our friend Adam about this, and he was saying two things that are sticking with me after our conversation. Number one, he's encouraging his congregation to pray for particular things, specific things. And the second thing is that the implication behind praying for particular things is that God does, in fact, respond to particular requests. And I certainly do pray like that, especially in moments of desperation or overwhelm or moments when I need a medical transport like you're talking about. I do pray like that. I just find myself doing it. And I don't always, but I also want to believe that my prayers do have some efficacy. They do have some impact. The way that I often think about prayer is that it reforms my desires, that it reforms the things that I'm hoping for, wanting for, wishing for, and that it's less about outcome than it is about the intention to align myself with, you could say, the will of God. To be honest, that's not a totally satisfactory answer, though, because there are moments when I'm like, no, in fact, I want this outcome. When someone gets sick, I want them to be healed. When my kids are having a really shitty day, I want them to experience something that says, you're all right, it's going to be okay. Like, I have these real desires, and it's not just me trying to align my desires with God. So there's a little confession for you, Haroon.
Do you remember the movie Pearl Harbor from about 26 years ago? So in World Cup time, not that long after America's first World Cup hosting, I believe that was our first time hosting the World Cup.
Yeah, I don't know.
I
believe you.
I'll just make things up.
Okay.
But it was around the year 2000, and I was in Egypt. I was studying Arabic. I was actually not studying Arabic. I told my parents I was going to Egypt to study Arabic with a friend of mine from college. We mostly just hung out and wandered around. Didn't learn much Arabic, but it was a hell of a time. We had an amazing summer, and we tried to do things that we found entertaining, and often this led to disaster, sometimes to comedy. One day in particular, I said to him, hey, I just saw a poster for Pearl Harbor, the movie. It's playing at a theater here. Do you want to go watch it? And we were missing America. We were missing home, and we wanted to see some good old-fashioned Americana. So we went to watch the movie, and the movie was in English, but it had Arabic subtitles in the bottom. And the reason I tell you this is important. So there's a point in the movie in which one of the characters says, nobody knows. And the Arabic translation, the subtitle was Allahu A'lam. God knows. Because there is no such expression in Arabic. And in most Muslim cultures, you can't say nobody knows because obviously God knows. So the way you say nobody knows is God knows. And the reason I bring that up is because to someone watching a Muslim culture community from the outside, you might say to yourself, oh, look, it's so suffused with religion. This must be a religious people. And therefore, what they are doing is true to their faith. What I think is important to remember is that the influence of religion is different, but that doesn't mean that invoking God indicates religiosity or sincerity necessarily. I don't think when they were subtitling and Allahu A'lam, they were thinking, hey, let's bring God into this. It's just, that's what you do. And so actually the danger here, I think, in a lot of Muslim contexts and communities is that when you are so surrounded by God talk, it is easy to think that you are being godly. Because there's so much religion into the rhythm of your life, that can mask whether or not the work is actually being done internally. And I remember reading recently, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, that one of the reasons people struggle with religion is because they're coming into it transactionally. And so they're treating God like a merchant, like they're going in to get a deal. And if they feel like they got a bad deal, if you feel like you got ripped off by a store, you never go back to the store. If I go to T-Mobile and say, hey, what's this charge in my bill? And I have a bad experience with customer service, I might stick with T-Mobile, but I'm not really enjoying my experience. I think that for me, that's been a particular challenge. And so I've tried to bring into prayer a lot more aspiration for qualities that I feel are lacking in me.
Yeah.
As opposed to outcomes that are beneficial for me. Not that I'm not asking for them. I'm not going to pretend like I'm not. But maybe I should start with asking forgiveness, asking for certain virtues, seeing if I'm actually getting better at the things that I think I should be getting better at, as opposed to, it would be really great if we got these investors, or I published that thing, or I got invited to this place, which is nice, but maybe that's missing the point.
Yeah, I hear you. I love the story about the movie in Egypt. I once saw Captain America in a theater in Beirut, and it just felt
So crazy. But I would kind of push you for a second.
Absolutely.
I want to know, do you think that when you pray for particular outcomes, that it actually does have an impact?
Yes.
Tell me an example that helps you to believe that.
There have been many instances where I've asked for something and I've gotten that thing in such a way that it feels almost impossible, if not absurd. And there have been other times where I've asked for things and I've encountered a hardship or an obstacle. And my initial reaction, and I'll be fully transparent here, my initial reaction is to be a little pissed off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not handling this with grace. There's no saintliness here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I find over weeks or months that maybe that was actually better for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you an example. This is a really weird one, but for whatever reason, I really struggled with it. So I went to college, NYU, and had a great time and I never really thought about what I was doing next. I was a complete bozo. I was a pretty smart kid as a young kid, but I didn't know what that meant and I didn't know how to apply that. I'm not trying to be arrogant. It came easily to me, which actually turned out to be a problem because I never really had to think about it. So when I graduated, I was totally at a loss for what to do. And my brother was an attorney. He still is an attorney. And so I said, I'll go to law school. And again, zero thought goes into this. And I tell myself, this is the right path for me. I went to law school. I dropped out after 9 weeks. I hated it. And then I crashed harder than I've ever crashed before because what am I supposed to do with my life? Now, in the grand scheme of things, it sounds kind of ridiculous, but at the time, it felt like a true existential crisis. Like my whole life had fallen apart and I had no idea what to do with myself. And so it took me a year to decide to go to grad school and I worked my butt off because I was like, I'm not going to mess this up. And I got into every school I applied to. And I remember I had to choose between two schools. And my heart said go to one school and my head said go to the other. And I went where my head pointed. And in that case, I should have followed my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I regretted that decision for years. And it actually burned me up inside.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me really angry that why did I make such a mistake? I missed out on so many opportunities. And it was only so many years later that I realized that because I was in a graduate program that wasn't right for me, I didn't pursue a traditional academic career, and that was actually better for me. And so now what I try to do is I try to pray for clarity. If there's good in this, let me see it, let me find it, let me take advantage of it, let me build with it. If there's bad in it, make it clear to me. And even if something is actually bad for me and it wouldn't be obvious, then I want that clarity.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, between two outcomes, let's say, I want this one definitely. No, I should pray for what's best for me, for my faith, for my life, for my family, for my afterlife, and give me that.
I love that answer. It makes me want to ask about your theology of the heart, the gut, the head, like where decisions come from. But maybe that's another episode. Okay. I want to swerve back into the World Cup for just a second. Okay?
Let's do it.
Okay. So I love sports so much. I grew up playing. If I have like an idol in life, it's definitely sports. Okay. And also, I sometimes wonder if what we have done, I'll talk about the American context. I can't speak authoritatively about the Moroccan context, is we've replaced religion with sports. And I think that you can look at sports in almost like a liturgical sort of formulation. There is a thing you do at the beginning. It's effused with nationalism.
Yeah, flyovers,
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
People make pilgrimage to certain places to go see games. I mean, World Cup maybe is an example of that. You wear certain vestments, certain things that identify you with a particular team or faith or however you want to call it. There's rituals, there's things that evoke the favor of the sports gods, whether it's, flipping your hat inside out and backwards for a rally cap for baseball or whatever it may be. So those are kind of like silly, kind of offhanded things. But then there's also just like the time that sports grabs from us, whether it's through youth sports or through watching sport, whatever it is, right? And so I sometimes wonder if acts like this, where we're praying publicly in a post-sporting event, if this is an attempt to bring God into sports, or if actually what we're doing is converting sports into our God.
Wow, that's a great one. I agree with you on many registers. I work with high schoolers, and I'm at an age, I'm wearing a Knicks shirt. It's Knicks written in Urdu font for those who are watching the YouTube video. It's by a company called Motherland. It's actually a gift from our daughter Maria for my birthday. And I've lately started to forget how old I am, not because I'm losing my mind, but because it no longer registers as that meaningful, right? Like I'm in my 40s. That's good. I'm 46. many of my friends have kids who are approaching or in high school, and some of them have taken to sports with such rigor and intensity that I feel like they're depriving their kids not just of a childhood, but of moral formation. So their children spend almost no time in religious spaces. They spend very little time learning about faith. And a challenge, I would put this out to any parent. For all the time you put into your kids' sports or education, how much time goes into their faith? And it doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all answer, but there should be an answer. There should be something of substance there. Why is it that we can push so hard in athletic competition, in education and college admissions, but when it comes to religion, we are okay with a subpar outcome? That itself is indicative of something. That maybe the invocation of God is just ritualistic if there's nothing else behind it. I remember I lived in Dubai for a year, and Dubai, of course, is like Las Vegas if it spoke Arabic. And it doesn't even really speak Arabic anymore. It's all blinged out. And the masjids, the mosques, are just as over the top as everything else. And I remember saying to an Emirati friend of mine that doesn't it make you feel weird when you walk into a house of God and it's so ridiculously gaudy or it's so insanely expensive? The Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi, as a case in point, must have cost billions of dollars. And his answer did make me stop and think. He said, look at everything we have, from our cars to our hotels to houses. He admitted maybe we should not have mosques that look like this. But if we have houses that look like that, what would it say if our mosques did not look equal, if not better? That if you are willing to spend this much on yourself, and then you allocate no importance to the divine, right? So to your point, I think one, yes, we do put more emphasis on sports than is needed. But two, also, I think that it depends on what we do with sports, right? If it's a challenge that is meant to make us better, I think that's a good thing. And there, I think God does actually care who wins the World Cup. But if it's meant to be a way to just make money and feed our egos or take time away from what's important, then it's absolutely wrong. And there, too, I think the question is, what does it do to us? Does it make us better? Does it make it worse? Is it a ritual that brings us as people into a greater appreciation for each other, for our shared humanity? Is it fun? Is it a reprieve from some of the ugliness and awfulness in the world? Or is it, like you said, an idol?
You asked the question before, do the best people make the best athletes? And I think almost definitively the answer is no. I mean, we talked about Kobe last episode. He's not a person that I would hope my son grows into, I would say.
Yeah, that's a totally valid point. That's actually like an essential point.
Yeah. And I would say something similar for like my favorite basketball player, Michael Jordan. I don't actually think that he lives a life that I want for my kids or for myself in terms of fulfillment, meaning, faithfulness, all that kind of thing. In the same way that prayer, I'm praying, you're praying that it will form us in to be in more alignment with God. I wonder how sports form us. And I think oftentimes the way they form us is into this hyper competitive, I will do whatever I can to get one over on you, even if that means stretching the rules, doing this kind of stuff, right? So I think in that way, sports does not have a positive formational impact. In my life, though, there are examples where it had an incredibly positive impact in terms of my formation. When I think about things like work ethic, when I think about things like cooperation, teamwork, leadership, all this stuff, I mean, that was the context in which I found myself in so many ways as a kid. And so you're right. It's not a simple thing. And I'm definitely not ready to throw out sports and just call it an idol and be done with it. I think that there is absolutely a redemptive elements of sports.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. I would add to that and build on that for a lot of people, sports were a way through which they expressed and regained their humanity. So
yes,
we could go to a Muhammad Ali, for example, or Jackie Robinson, that they challenged a narrative that probably for a lot of people is hard to imagine, but just right here, not far from where we live 50 or 60 years ago, I have met people in this community who've since passed away in our Cincinnati Muslim community who are practicing physicians who would go down to Kentucky in the 60s and would not be allowed to use a bathroom. They were surgeons in hospitals. They were saving people's lives. And then when it came time to use a bathroom, they had to go back to Ohio. That's wild. And that happened not in my lifetime, but in the lifetime of people I've met. And so I think that sports can do that. I think one of the reasons I find the World Cup so
make the
exciting.
connection to sports. What does the sports have to do with that story?
So I was actually watching when the Moroccan players all prostrated on the ground and then the coach was celebrating, the fans were going wild. And I thought to myself, how utterly bonkers it is that the World Cup even exists. And I mean that it is a kind of miracle. And I'm not being facetious, that throughout most of human history, nothing like this would even be conceivable. That all the nations of the world could watch and compete together in a spectacle that is effectively peaceful and allows us to channel real aggressive impulses and real ethnic and tribal and, yes, religious impulses in ways that are still competitive, sometimes a little ugly, sometimes uncomfortable, but do not require us to bludgeon each other to death. And in fact, the way to win at this is by building an infrastructure on a national scale that fundamentally uplifts everyone in your country. Morocco could not have done this 20 years ago. And now countries that want to be like Morocco realize the kind of investment that is required takes decades of patience and planning and is bigger than any one person. You can't just do it with money. It takes discipline, it takes time, it takes energy. And certainly someone could say there are better things one could do with money, but I've seen as a person of Pakistani ancestry who's paid close attention to the Muslim world, the global south in recent decades, there are far worse uses of money. And to give people something to build towards and compete and to channel, even, I mean, for us as Americans, right? This has been a pretty shitty year, right? Donald Trump, I mean, before he lost the war against the reflecting pool, lost the war over the Strait of Hormuz, we were joking earlier about how he really struggles with bodies of water in different states, right? Different states of energy, ice or liquid water, whatever it might be. And it was depressing. And then all these people came to America and we got to show the best of ourselves and they got to see us and we got to learn about them. And it was nice. It was actually like, oh yeah, we're actually a pretty freaking awesome country. Unfortunately, we have a kakistocracy ruled by the corrupt and the worst. And that's dragging us down and it is harming us. But there's still so much beautiful about this country. I think the World Cup is the best 250th celebration of America that America could have asked for. And it happened almost coincidentally. But you could say there is a bit of divine blessing in that. There's a spark of hope in that. That's why I think God cares who wins the World Cup. Not as in God actually cares that this country or this team or this continent wins, but that how we choose to channel who we are matters. And I think the world order that exists, for all its flaws, is a lot better than a lot of the things that came before it. And things like the World Cup reflect an investment in sustaining that. And if you can widen that circle, right? Like open that circle up. Like now Morocco's hosting in 2030 with Portugal and Spain. And even that is beautiful. 3 countries hosting together. And if you had told someone 50 years ago that Morocco, Spain, and Portugal would be hosting a World Cup, and by the way, all 3 teams are damn good teams, you probably would have been laughed out of the room. And in some places, you wouldn't have been able to use the bathroom. But that's a shift, right? So I look at it as a story of what we are capable of as a species. That is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. I'm going to ask you one more question. This is the most important question of the entire episode. All right. It's also the last question. I was going to ask, who are you praying to win the World Cup?
I'm not praying for anyone to win the World Cup. although no, I'm lying. I'm lying because I don't consciously do it. But when the team I'm rooting for is down or it's penalty kicks, I am definitely invoking God. I'm like, inshallah, 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 bismillah, bismillah, bismillah. You know, I'll invoke abundant istighfar. I'll ask God to forgive my sins, to pardon me. And so that maybe then my prayer will rise a little bit higher. But I'll tell you honestly, I think one of the fun things about it is now that the US is out and unfortunately under sort of a bit of a cloud, at this point, I feel like I'm enjoying the competition. I mean, I have teams that I'd be happier to see win, but more than anything, I wish I had paid to make pilgrimage.
Thanks for listening, and thanks to Zach Swellbar for recording our theme music. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know what questions we should be asking and who else we should be talking to.